I'm here to determine whether this is a fit for us. I'm not here to try to persuade you to choose me.
Hey Growth Detect, welcome back. I'm your host, Tyler Sumala, and we are continuing to dive into the top 10 questions that I get from architecture firm owners most often. So today, I've invited my friend Justin Smith to dive into how firms can evaluate which projects you should take on and which projects you should avoid. And that is right, we are talking about your go or no-go process. So if you find yourself saying yes to nearly every project and going after anything that comes your way, then this is for you. And before we jump in, a huge thanks to our friends at the American Institute of Steel Construction for sponsoring Season 4 of the Growth Tech podcast. Here is a fun fact for you. Did you know all domestically produced steel beams and columns are 100% recyclable and contain, on average, 92% recycled content? You can learn more about sustainable steel at aisc.org/sustainable. That is aisc.org/sustainable. Check it out and let's go ahead and jump in. Justin, I am super excited to have you here to talk about something that I'm hearing very often from firm owners when I'm having conversations with them about the projects that they're taking on, about the work that they're doing, because this is such a large component that I feel like we almost never talk about. But it's this idea that you can actually, and probably every architect has at this point, take on projects that maybe you shouldn't have taken on, right? Work on things that you shouldn't be working on. But I'm curious because I so often hear, like, how do I actually determine which opportunities I should or shouldn't pursue? And I'm wondering, like, what your initial reaction to that is.
Gosh, it's so tough because it's one of those things that I think a lot of architects find themselves in, and it's natural to wonder, how did I even end up here? You know, maybe even if you rewind it back, I got this first call about this project and it seemed so great. We were all so excited about it, but now we're in the middle and it's kind of like, what happened? How did we get here? What were we thinking? So often I see this problem start at really the first interaction that architects or engineers even are having with their clients. And it's around misunderstanding what it is that we're really trying to accomplish in those early interactions. I think so many people look at the early days of a pursuit as an exercise in persuasion or sales, trying to convince the prospect to choose you. What I often encourage people to do is to totally flip the script and say, you have a service that is in high demand. And if you're listening to this, you're probably pretty good at it. So instead of thinking about this prospect as somebody that you need to persuade to choose you, what if instead we looked at it and we said, what I have to offer is a limited quantity, and I can't offer it to everybody. And in order to make sure I'm using my talents to the best of my ability and I'm driving my business in the most responsible way possible, instead, what if I looked at this prospect and said, are you the right fit for me? And it's that simple switch of, I'm not trying to convince you to choose me. I'm performing some rigorous analysis on you as a client and this opportunity as a potential project to determine, is this the right thing to achieve my goals? And that little tweak changes everything.
I am so excited about that frame shift already. We're like 2 minutes into that, but that is so important because you're exactly right. Like, I think there's something embedded that's like, oh my gosh, an opportunity is in the door. How do I win it? Right. And that's almost the very first thought that comes to mind right when something comes in, rather than, is it actually like worth it for me to work with this person? Will this ultimately, lead to better health for my firm financially, for my mental health? Is this going to be good on multiple levels? And we kind of forget about that evaluation process. And you're exactly right. That's how you end up with, halfway through the project and you're like, damn, I should not have done this. But here we are. And so now I kind of have to push through. I'm excited because we've known each other now, believe it or not, like it's probably been a few years, which is kind of crazy. But we actually, I came across you when I was working at Monograph the first time, and I'll never forget, there was like a group of us that were working there, and we were like, who is this Justin guy that keeps popping up with really valuable comments? Like, in our posts, like, this guy knows who he's talking about. And at that time, by the way, like, you didn't have a picture on your profile. It was really funny. So it was Justin Smith, right, which is your name, but no profile picture, which is like, I don't even know if this is a real person or not. But anyways, we've since, jumped on calls together and done many things, but very impressed with the work that you do and, the value that you deliver working with engineers and architects, both with the Zweig Group and then also with your own company. But can you just give people a little introduction to who you are and what you do?
Sure. So my name's Justin Smith, kind of classically trained structural engineer, worked in the engineering field for a while, and then slowly over probably the last 8 or 9 years have transitioned away from technical work and more into operations and a little bit of strategic advisory work for architects and engineers. So I kind of joke with people that I have the best job in the world because I get to work with architects and engineers who I love that are doing great work that is necessary, right? We're not selling snake oil. We're selling a meaningful service that the world needs. And my job is to help them do two things. Number one, enjoy their work a little bit more. And number two, make more money from it. And every time I talk about that, I think, I cannot believe, clients, if you're listening, forget I said this. I can't believe people pay me money to do this because I love it. I love it. It feels like the perfect intersection of what I really love to do and what I've found some success doing. So I love it. I love it.
Well, more power to you. I mean, we need more people like you. And it's because, somehow it bumps me out a little bit to come across both architecture and engineering firm owners that almost need that reminder, because there should be so much more celebration around the work that they do, because the value is so enormous. And it's not even, and I'm not saying it's their fault. It's not, because there's different ways of doing it. But like as an industry, as a community, I just wish it was more encouraging, right? Around, holy smokes, you provide so much value, just like you talked about, like at the front, like this reframing of what it is that you're actually doing. So important to have that confidence in the value that you're delivering and what you have and all of your education and experience, and what you're actually doing for clients is so much more than a calculation. It's so much more than a drawing. You're delivering and changing lifestyles and workplaces and public zones, and there's just so many amazing things happening. So yes, keep doing what you're doing, Justin. I'm glad that you have people that are paying you to do it. So when we think about, this issue of determining, which things are actually worth your time, why do you think this is such a persistent issue in the industry? Like, why do you think it comes up so often?
I mean, I have my own opinions, and these are anecdotal in nature. I've got no research to support this, but I think, number one, there's a scarcity mindset at a lot of firms where, rather than looking at the service that they offer as not being a commodity in the slightest, it is a high level, very scarce service that the world desperately needs, and we should price our work according to that value. A lot of firms instead live in fear of, well, what if this is the last project? Or what if there's a dry spell coming after this? And even though it's imperfect, I should take it because revenue is better than no revenue. I think issue number one is probably that. I came up through the engineering profession during the '08 recession. So I think folks that are running firms today, probably similar age group as myself, right? We felt that really hard. So on some level, I understand where that comes from. But at the same time, at least in recent memory, it really hasn't been the case. I think the other issue is lack of belief. I think these two things conspire, right? We have a scarcity mindset. We believe we need every project because some revenue is better than none. And then that's coupled with just a struggle to believe in a meaningful way that we are worth what we want to try to charge for our work. And those two things sort of beat their heads together, and they cause us to make really bad decisions about which projects to take. So if we could see that the service that we provide is necessary and scarce and should be priced accordingly, and if we could simultaneously believe that in a meaningful way, I think firms would find it easier to say, I believe in what we're doing enough here, insert company that you work at, to say that if I say no to this project because it's a bad fit, that there's a very strong likelihood there's going to be another project that's likely a better fit coming behind it. And I'd much rather reserve my staff's time for that than tie them up on this thing that might not be a good fit for us in the first place.
I wholeheartedly and anecdotally agree with that. I've also seen the exact same thing. It definitely comes from that scarcity mindset of being concerned. And funny enough, that's also why, like, when I work with architects, it's one of the first things I do is get them the skills and systems they need to start generating more leads consistently. right? Because it's very easy to be in that scarcity mindset, like you said, if you think that this could be the last project that comes in the door. But the second that you actually have consistent lead flow and you know, hey, roughly this month I'm going to have 10 opportunities that come in, roughly next month I'm going to have 10 opportunities that come in, it becomes so much easier to believe in your value, to not have the scarcity mindset, and also to begin like experimenting, right? A/B testing, like trying to increase your fees, seeing what happens, seeing how people respond, because it's a process, right? And you have some kind of stability in the business, and you know that leads are coming in. So yeah, I've definitely seen that to be true as well. Like, what do you see as being the most common pitfalls for architects and engineering firms when they go about trying to evaluate whether or not they should take on a project or an opportunity?
So it's always the same two. Number one is they have no structured process. So in the absence of a process, it becomes essentially a popularity contest, right? If principal A typically is a rainmaker, then if principal A says we should take this project, we listen to them. We don't necessarily second guess whether it was the right, decision matrix that was used, or if we really identified it. It's just, hey, Tyler's really great with clients, and if Tyler says this is a good project, we should say yes to it. The other side of the coin is they have a structured process, but nobody follows it. And it's that second one that's really sinister, because firms will look at it and they'll say, well, we have this really great process. They might even have flow charts. They might have diagrams. They might have scripts. They might have all these things. And the challenge is that nobody follows it. So they dupe themselves into thinking we are making good decisions because we have a process. But no one is stepping back and saying, well, but are we following the process when we make the decision? A lot of times when I work with firms on project management or project delivery, we start at the opportunity evaluation phase and we say, let's talk about how we make decisions. And there's a running joke that is more truth than it is joke, which is a lot of firms say something like, yeah, we've got a go, no go process. And it's to say go to everything. And the truth is, for even firms that have processes often find themselves saying yes to anything they can get their hands on. I mean, it is extremely rare for me to work with a firm that can recite in any meaningful way real statistics about the number of projects or percentage of projects that they said no to in the last year. They either don't track it, or it's because they don't say no to anything.
That's funny. I've seen the same thing. It's rare for me to come across a firm that actually knows their real success rate with going after projects that they actually want. So like after you've determined that it's actually, worth your time to go after. But yeah, having a clear understanding of those metrics makes a big difference. And to your point, yeah, if you cannot think in your mind of a project that you actively decided not to pursue after having met with the client and evaluated it, then you probably don't actually have a go or no go process in place.
Agree completely.
Yeah. So we get to my favorite part, right? We have an architecture or engineering firm. They decide to join us in the conversation. Justin, they're sitting in between us right now, and they're saying, okay, well, how do I actually go about building and implementing a true and trusted go or no go process in my firm that works for us? How would you start that?
Okay, so step number one, and hopefully they've done this pre-work before they put themselves in front of us, but step one is you've got to have very clear goals for what you're trying to accomplish as a firm, right? If your firm's goals are more, what do you want out of this year? More than last year. Well, then it's going to be very hard to argue with you when you say, I feel like I should say yes to project X because it will get me more than I got last year, and that's my only goal. So what I love to see are firms evaluating metrics that are more meaningful than I want more revenue than I had last year. So we want to be looking at our project mix from the perspective of what types of projects are helping our staff do their best work, what type of projects are generating the best returns for our firm, what types of projects are generating the strongest client engagement with the longest tail on it. So start there and say, what are we really trying to do? If 3 opportunities presented themselves in front of us and we could only take 2 of them, what are the things that you as a firm owner would want to know to help you make that decision. Now, it's funny because I do this little thought experiment, and the firm owner almost always says, well, I'd want to figure out a way to take all three. And I think, that really illustrates the problem. It's no, that's not an option. We've got to get really clear on what's important to us. So step one is, what are your goals? And what are the metrics that are best aligned with the level of performance that you're trying to achieve? Then from there, we want to look at, okay, once we've established that, what are the types of opportunities, whether that's a client type, a project location, whatever the facets of the project are that feed that level of performance. We want to pull those out, and we want to develop a structured set of questions that make it almost impossible for us to not get the information that we need, right? So we say, even if we want to have a really lightweight go, no go process, at a minimum, we've got to get the answers to these questions, however many there are. I find that it's usually somewhere between about 3 and 7. There's 3 and 7 questions that for any firm will help you define what a good project looks like, what an okay project looks like, what a poor project looks like. Now, if you do that, you're doing better than most. But where you can really kick this up a notch is if you work in a firm where there's more than one person that's evaluating opportunities. So if you're in a small firm and it's just you, then hopefully by asking those questions, you know what kind of answers you want to hear, right? So you can listen for them, and if you hear them, good for you. But if you're working with a medium-sized firm or a slightly larger firm where there are many people in your firm having this conversation, you want to come to consensus on what good, okay, and bad sound like, right? If I ask you a question like, what kind of budget are you working with on this project, Mr. Client? What would a good answer sound like? What would a bad answer sound like? What would a moderate answer sound like? Good doesn't necessarily sound like I'm working with a lot of money. Good might sound like the client has command of the budget for the project. They have clear expectations for the person that they're hiring, and they are comfortable with that level of disclosure at this point. To me, that's a great opportunity. It's not necessarily about, is it a big amount or a small amount? It's about, am I checking those boxes? Now, bad might sound like either A, I have no clue what the budget is, or it might sound like I know what the budget is, but I'm not going to tell you. So what we want to do is want to create these questions, and then we want to create a spectrum of possible answers, good on one end, bad on one end, and we want to teach everybody that talks to clients how to ask the question, how to listen for the right answer. Because if you can do that, if you got 3 to 7 questions, you've got your spectrum of answers, then it becomes plug and play. We just decide as a company, how many goods do we need in order to say yes? How many bads are we willing to tolerate and still say yes? And you teach everybody that talks to clients how to have that conversation. So if I'm talking to a firm owner, at step 1, you must know what your goals are, and you must be able to back out into the types of projects that get you those goals. Part 2 is you got to figure out what are the questions that we've got to ask in order to rapidly diagnose the quality of the opportunity. And then part 3 is we've got to be really clear as a company on what good sounds like, what okay sounds like, and what bad sounds like. I'm convinced that if firms applied any level of rigor with that kind of process, a lot of the problem projects would filter themselves out in one conversation.
All right, Growth Techs, check this out. In Boulder and Atlanta, old buildings came down, but their steel beams did not go to waste. They went straight into new projects, and that is the power of U.S.-made structural steel. So here is how it works. Instead of relying on virgin iron and blast furnaces, we actually use modern technology to melt recycled scrap in electric arc furnaces, and that produces 6 million tons of the most sustainable steel in the world every single year. And the carbon footprint keeps shrinking. It's already down 12% in the last 3 years, and as our power grid moves toward renewables, it'll keep falling. Steel is strong, it lasts for decades, and it can be reused over and over without losing quality. It is a natural fit for adaptive reuse and for sustainable design. And if you want to put it to work, then download the free sustainability toolkit from our sponsor at aisc.org/buildgreen. That is aisc.org/buildgreen. One word there at the end. Go and check it out, and we'll get back to the show.
I have 2 more follow-up questions on that, actually.
Go for it.
One is, what do you do when you realize in the middle of that conversation that that person does not fit the qualifications?
Oof. It's tough because you have to go into these conversations completely detached from the outcome. If you go into the conversation with the goal of winning, then you will do anything and everything to try to persuade the person to say yes. But if you go into the conversation with a cold, emotionless, detached disposition, and you say, this is a fact-finding mission, this is not an exercise in persuasion, then it becomes very easy. I'm sorry, given our workload, we're not in a position to be able to take on projects that don't have well-defined budgets. If you're able to gather that information and share it with me, I'd be happy to revisit with you. But at this point, we're not in a position to be able to take this on. Thank you very much.
That's great. Okay, cool.
Right? I'm not here to try to convince you.
If
you're not prepared to share it with me, and that's one of my criteria, thank you very much, but also no thank you.
Yeah. On the other side, I'm curious I have my own views on this, which I'm happy to share after, but like when in the process do you ask this? Like with the firms that you're working with, is this a form that they fill out before they even get to the intro call? Is this something that you ask right at the beginning? Like when does this happen?
So for me, my process, people are, at least for me, when it comes to my services, there's one way I do it. When it comes to an architecture and engineering firm, I might suggest otherwise. So this is where it gets a little tricky because the work that I do, architecture firms, engineering firms, they don't often know how to buy it. They don't know, they don't know what they should be asking. They don't really know what information I need. So it's typically quite easy because I do know what I need. So it's usually can hop on, usually between a 15 and 45-minute conversation right out of the gate and just make it known from the beginning. Hey, I'm going to lead this conversation and it's necessary for both of us to get to a point where I can determine if I can help you. And if I can't, I don't want to waste any of your time. The tricky thing for buyers of architecture and engineering services is if they have done multiple projects in the past, then they're probably a little bit more familiar with how this works. But the advice would still be the same. You've got to get to the truth as fast as possible. And you are able to do that, in my experience, most efficiently with a conversation that you lead. Now, when I say you lead, what I mean is I'm not here to say, Tyler, super excited to talk to you. Tell me about your project. It's, hey, Tyler, thanks for reaching out to us. In order to make sure we're a good fit for you, I've got some questions here that I'd like to run you through. So if you're ready, let me go ahead and get started. Right? I'm here to determine whether this is a fit for us. I'm not here to try to persuade you to choose me. So for me, and what I typically suggest is if you can carve out 15 to 45 minutes, depending on the complexity of the ask, you can get to the right answer very efficiently. I don't recommend doing it in any form of written communication. It's for two reasons. Number one, you can pick up so much more information about the emotion underneath the decision, about whether the person's telling you the truth, if you can see their face. Number two, if the person won't get on the phone with you to talk about their project, it's pretty much an automatic no.
That's great point. Great point. Yes.
Because you probably got the email on a mass email list where they said, I've got a project, I need your price.
Sure.
And
that's right.
It's like, well, that's not how we work. And if that is unacceptable to you as a client, then that's a really clear sign for me that you're not a good fit for us. Other firms might be happy to take you. They might have a different business model. You might be a great fit for them. But for us at my firm, XYZ, whatever it is, we need to know who we're working with. And the only way that we can do that is by actually seeing you and talking to you.
Yeah, I love that. And I do think about this. I think about it a little bit differently, but like I definitely generally agree. Like qualification needs to happen like in a conversation. When you try to put it in a form on your website, it's difficult. It's difficult. You're probably, even the answers that they're giving probably aren't going to be the best answers. And so there's definitely a challenge there. There's something that I recommend doing, which is that you actually do the qualification later on in that initial conversation. But here, I'll tell you why. So the first one is that you've already determined that this is actually a real project, right? That it's worth having a conversation with. So like, what do I mean by real? It has a budget, it has a site, it has a timeline. I don't necessarily know what those three things are, but I know that they exist, right? So if those three things exist, then like it is worth it for me to have a conversation with potential client about this project. And so by doing that, then I'm actually okay with taking 30 minutes out of my calendar to have this conversation. I also think it's really good to just lock into the idea that you're going to be having a 30-minute conversation with a potential client, or 45-minute, just from the simple practice of like getting better at having those conversations, right? Even if it doesn't work out, it's really good to run through that exercise of getting comfortable with having conversations and with asking questions to clients. And the information that you tend to learn, right, you're actually going to continue to learn more about that go or no-go process. Like if you wait and ask those qualifications later, maybe there's other things that come out earlier in the conversation that make it more clear that this is probably not going to be a good fit as well. So you're going to come to like understand your market a little bit more. But the main reason is that depending on what market you're in, you can be working with clients that are very uneducated in the expectations and the project itself, right? So let's think about like residential, for example, right? Residential, typically these clients have never worked with an architect before. They usually have very unrealistic expectations on how much things are actually going to cost, how long something's going to take, what things are actually involved, right? And so if you begin that conversation immediately with, what's your budget, right? And they tell you something like, our budget's, $1 million. And you're like, well, I'm sorry to say that it's probably going to be double that. So it's probably not worth it for us to continue this conversation. Let me know if you revisit it. What you've actually missed out on potentially is that they might tell you that their budget's 1 million when they actually have 2, right? They just don't realize that it costs 2, and you don't have enough knowledge, information, context to understand like how to explain that to them accurately. Right. And so by kind of moving the qualification back towards the end of that intro call, where you have a longer conversation about, like you said, tell me what it is about what you're looking to do. What are you afraid of happening? What is the outcome that you're actually looking for? What are you looking for in a partnership? And then you go into those qualifications with a full understanding of the context. Then when they tell you something that's unrealistic, you can actually have a contextual conversation about why that's there. And potentially still end up working with a client that is worth your time, that is a good fit, but they just simply didn't understand like how the process worked.
I completely agree. And just to be clear, if someone ever got on the phone with me and I said, "Hi, I'm Justin, what's your budget?" Feel free to hang up on me, because that is awful. But my approach, or the approach I like to keep in the back of my mind, is what I've heard referred to and what I refer to as the DOC method, DOC. Diagnose the need. Now, the need could be, I need an architect. I don't care who it is. Or the need could be, I'm building a house. This is a once in a lifetime project. It's got to be perfect. But we've got to diagnose what it is that they're really looking for. And then usually after that phase of the conversation, you've diagnosed what they're looking for. You move on to O, which is offer. Now, you either offer to help them or you offer to end the conversation, right? But you're following the same approach. It's in order for me to be able to offer anything to you, either your time back, because this is not a fit for us, or perhaps working together on this. I've got to first diagnose what it is that you're looking for and whether it fits into my criteria. So diagnose first, then offer. I picture that offer as a fork in the road. The offer is we will either continue talking or we will not continue talking. And then C stands for close. Now close, and this is where it gets really tricky for people, because a lot of folks hear close and they think like close the deal, close the sale, right? Get them to say yes. And that's not at all what I'm talking about. It's close the discovery conversation and move on to what's next. Now, depending on how forthcoming the client is or the prospect is and how skilled the person is that is leading the conversation, you can get through D, O, and C in 15 minutes. Or if the client really wants to talk, it could be 45 minutes. But the key is I'm not in a position to know what to do until I've at least gone through those 3 steps. Hey, what's going on? What brought you here? What are you looking to achieve? What made you think of me? And then I move on to, okay, great. So if there was a way that we could work together and I could support you in getting what you want, is that something you'd be interested in talking about? And there are clients that say, no, I've had 15 minutes with you and I can already tell it's not going to work. No problem, right? Nothing ventured, nothing gained. But there's something really interesting that happens there when you give some power back to the prospect, right? I've helped diagnose what your issue is. Now, after this thoughtful questioning where I've essentially encouraged you to share everything that you want in a partner, and I've listened intently because I'm trying to figure out, are we right for each other? Then I offer you, okay, if I had an idea of how to help you, is that something you'd be interested in talking about? Giving them that power back does a really interesting thing in the conversation, because now they say, well, wait a minute, what do you know that I don't know, right? How can you help me? If you've got a way to help me, I definitely want to talk to you about it. And by giving them agency in that conversation and not having it feel like an interrogation, you can start to build a meaningful relationship there. And exactly what you said, even if it doesn't lead to you getting the project, you've demonstrated to a new person that I am willing to take time to hear about your project, to offer you a potential path forward, and then respect whatever decision that you make. And even if the client doesn't choose you, they're likely to remember that about you, and that there's value in just that little seedling of a relationship that you've planted.
Yeah, I like that. I like the doc. That's similar to, I have a framework that I teach. I call it draw, but draw is almost embedded in the D of doc that you have for diagnose. It's basically like how to diagnose what exactly they want. And then the offer is really, you're framing up the next meeting, because you can't, like, you're not going to diagnose and win them in the same conversation usually. For most firms, like, you can't. It's gonna take a couple of conversations depending on what it is. So I always use that to frame up the next thing. Like, hey, it sounds like this is your situation. This is what you're looking to do. Why don't we go ahead and set aside some time next week? Happy to walk you through exactly how we can help you and how we've helped other clients do the same. And so like you're dangling that carrot, so to say, kind of like what you're talking about, where they're like, what's different here? What's going, like, you're giving them a reason to continue engaging with you, essentially, after you've determined that they're a good fit. What are the KPIs and like different things that you would recommend firms look at and monitor to know whether or not they're actually making progress on this go or no go adventure?
So it depends on what you want to measure, but win rate is an obvious one. Like, if you follow a rigid process and you follow it to the letter and you do all the things that you as a firm say that you should be doing, I would really like to know your level of success, because I believe that it is quite a bit higher than most firms realize if they were to isolate the opportunities where they actually did the things that they say they do all the time. I also would like to know what percentage of opportunities you say no to, because if your win rate is low, let's say, and the percentage of opportunities that you say no to is also very low, then to me, I've got an inkling that you're probably chasing a lot of projects that you shouldn't be chasing. Now, if your win rate is very high and you are pretty rigorous in saying no to things that are not a good fit, then I would say, okay, you're kind of cooking with gas here. What you've got going is working for you. The other one, and this one's a little tricky to measure because most firms don't measure it, but usually principals or people that are in proposal conversations have a pretty good feel for this. Percentage of the time that clients, maybe reject is too strong a word, but push back on your fees. Like, how often are clients making comments about you being too expensive or you being more expensive than the firm down the street, or commentary about, it's tough for me to see the value here? Because if you're not hearing that, you are not charging enough.
Say that one more time. Just say it one more time for everyone.
Well, it's like, I love the firms that are like, oh my God, I got on the phone with that person and I sent them a letter proposal and they signed it the same day. And I don't ever want to take the air out of their balloon, but you probably underfeed the project. They're probably like, I cannot believe this firm is charging me this little. I better sign this thing before they realize it. Right. And so I think the discovery process and having some kind of structure in the way that you do it lends itself to higher success rates, because you are more equipped with better information when you actually present the proposal. So win rates, projects that you say no to, how often your fees are protested. And then there's just the kind of conventional suite of performance multipliers. How successful are you when you win the project and actually deliver it? You might be winning projects and you might be feeling really good about your fees, but if you're bringing them in at, a 2.1 multiplier, then I'm looking at it and I'm saying, you're pricing your work far too low. And that might be why these clients are saying yes. So there's front end metrics about opportunity evaluation and win rate and things like that. But then on the back end, we want to pair that with, are your performance numbers actually indicative of healthy levels of performance? And I can just think of my own work. When I first started doing this, I charged what I charged, right? However much it was to do what it was that I did. And then I would get into these projects and I would realize how labor intensive they were. And what on the front end felt like a really good fee that I felt really good about because the client said yes, I would look at on the back end and say that was foolish. That was far too low. Now, I have a client that I've done a lot of work with over the years, and we're very close and good friends. And he likes to give me a hard time. And he'll say things like, the work is great. We appreciate, what you're doing for us. And I got to tell you, the price is right. And he says it because he knows it stings me. We're friends, and so he can get away with it. But the truth is, if a client is applauding your price and telling you how happy they are with your price, then it is too low.
It's funny because there's something about architecture and engineering services that are literally created perfectly for the exact reaction and problem that you're talking about. Because what happens is that you sign, architecture and engineering fees are not small, like in number generally, right? 50, 100, 1 million, depending on the size. So you're like, awesome, I just signed a $100,000 contract, right? And then it's like the next day you're like, oh my gosh, I have to do a $100,000 project. We have to staff it. We have to execute it. It has to stay profitable, right? And so there's so much back end work, to your point, and it's really easy to fall into that problem, really.
Yeah, I think there's a difference. There's a huge difference between chasing revenue and trying to create high levels of profit. And I think a lot of architecture and engineering firms kind of swoon over revenue, right? I got $1 million fee. I got a $200,000 fee, whatever it is. Look at me. Or I've got to say yes to this. The fee is huge. But listen, you can make a lot of money on a big fee. You can also lose a lot of money on a big fee. And I think looking at every project you take as how comfortable are we with the level of risk that we're taking here, and being realistic about the fact that, 5% leakage on a $100,000 fee is far easier to tolerate than 5% leakage on $1 million fee. One of them could cripple your whole firm.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah. It's almost like, hey, you have this rare jewel, right? And it's like, do you trust?
Yeah.
The rare jewel being like the business that you've built, right? Do you trust your client to actually hold on to that jewel, safely and take good care of it over that period of time? Like, would you hand them this? It's an interesting way to look at it. Yeah, I
can tell you, most firms don't, at least from my outside perspective, don't think of themselves that way.
Right.
And I don't, yeah, they certainly should. And it has the added benefit of being true.
Yeah.
But a lot of them, I think, have just been beaten down over the last 10 or 15 years with fee pressure. And so some of them have kind of lost that belief that what they do has value. I don't know how the world continues to function without architects and engineers doing what they do. And there are a few other professions that have a greater impact than they do. So it just seems so counterintuitive to say, yes, and we are only worth what our clients tell us we're worth.
That's right. Yes. Yeah, that's exactly right. That is the challenge. But as long as you and I and a good collection of people continue telling architects that, hey, you're worth more, and also just step outside. Just for a moment and really think about. Kind of like what Justin and I. It's easier for you and I think, to see this now. I have 1,000% been have run my own studio and thought I have to have the lowest fee, right, in order to compete. And so I know why it happens and I know how it happens. But when you take a step out and you realize the value that you're actually providing, and that you see this, this is one fish in a giant sea of potential clients. And there's some, how do you access those in these different ways? There's a lot of opportunity for all the architects and engineers out there. Justin, where do people go to learn more about you?
Well, my LinkedIn profile now has a picture, so you can find me there, yes. Justin Smith. You can also email me at Justin, Justin, at aeclead.com. Or you can bother Tyler, and he will get you my information.
That's true.
But one closing thought, and I think this is maybe where a lot of this conversation hinges, in my opinion, is There is a place in the market for commodity engineering firms, commodity architecture firms, firms that just want every project and want to do decent work. And the world needs that. And I, in no way, am looking down upon anyone that runs, a high volume business that churns out meaningful work. The tricky part is for firms that really want premium fees, you have to get really honest about the service and the product you are putting out and say, what is it that we are doing that is meaningfully differentiated from everybody else? And I think the tricky thing is a lot of firms look in the mirror and they say, I want to believe I'm different. I want to believe I'm better, but I don't know what it is that I am different or better at. And if I don't know it first, how am I ever going to communicate it? And that unfortunately is true. I think every firm would really do themselves some favors to look internally and say, what is it that we are so good at, so much better at than everybody else? And how do we bring a more surgical level of focus to the projects we go after so we get more of those things that are a better fit for our lane? But you've got to be able to communicate what your lane is.
Essentially what you're saying is value. It all comes down to value communication. What is your ability to communicate your own value? And I've found the exact same thing to be true. Justin, actually, you're a member of the studio. But if you are a firm member thinking about doing that, please join Justin and I inside the studio. That's exactly, the problems that we're trying to chase on a regular basis. But yeah, getting better and refining that value communication process is the only way to do premium services. And if you talk to and actually kind of reverse engineer the firms that are absolutely crushing it, they have a very clear and concise and evident way of communicating what their value is and making it easy for their ideal clients to say yes to it. And without
completely
that,
agree.
It's like there's not anything there. So you got to get there. You got to get there.
Completely agree. Yeah. Completely agree.
Justin, thank you so much for joining us. We'll bring you back.
Oh, goody.
What a way to end it.
All right, Growth Detect, that is a wrap on this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoy the podcast, then please take 30 seconds to share a review and tell me your favorite part so that I can keep making it better for you. And hey, if you want to work with me directly to increase your fees and start winning the biggest projects of your career, then send me an email at hello@growthdetect.com with the word grow. That is it. Just email me the word grow at hello@growthdetect.com and I will get you sorted out. All right, I'll see you next time, friends.